Welcome back to the Trendline from the SiriusXM studios in Washington, D.C. Here's Kristen Soltis Anderson.
Welcome back to the Trendline with Kristen Soltis Anderson here on SiriusXM's POTUS Channel 124. I'm joined now by Haley Victory Smith, an editorial fellow at USA Today. You can find her on social media at Haley_Victory. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the way candidates are or aren't using social media to reach voters in the 2020 campaign. Haley, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So first, I want to talk about what campaigns are doing. And I want to start off by talking about Mike Bloomberg. Over the last week or two, there have been some interesting reports of some very prominent social media influencers posting pro-Bloomberg content. Now, this includes folks like, and I won't say the name here because this is a family-friendly channel, but F Jerry, which is a social media influence collective consulting agency, most prominently known for being the guys who did the social media for Fire Festival. So we have seen the limits of what social media influence can do, but nonetheless, it was just very funny to all of a sudden see that the Bloomberg campaign seems to have made an aggressive, and I assume well-funded, effort to reach social media influencers. Talk to me a little bit about that strategy.
Yeah, so it's definitely an interesting strategy for sure. That's one word to describe it. I think essentially what the campaign has been trying to do is like create earned media that they wouldn't have otherwise had by posting really weird content. So the memes are actually, I feel like, of the things they've done, like probably the smartest things that they've posted. But they've also done, you know, these really weird, like that video of where they dubbed President Trump and he was saying lies, lies, lies. And then there were those like burning, dancing gingerbread men on his shoulders.
Listeners, if you have no idea what this is, you are not alone. I have no idea.
Sounds like I'm on pay.
I am going to go Google Bloomberg burning dancing gingerbread man. No, I have not seen it. But I'm going to look it up as soon as we finish.
It's insane. They also put Mike Bloomberg's face on a meatball, like on a photo. I
did see that.
That was a weird
and was
one.
Perplexed.
Yes, but the memes are actually, in my opinion, pretty smart because they were funny, and it was something that you looked at and you were like, wait, is this fake? Like for a little bit, I thought that this was just like totally fake, totally photoshopped, and it was fake, but it was also a meme. So it's supposed to be fake. So I thought that was really interesting. And then there have been reports just yesterday, actually, that apparently the campaign is going to start paying, I think, like, I can't remember how many influencers it is, but they've started to, like, march out this army of influencers for Mike Bloomberg on Instagram. And apparently they're supposed to be doing 20 to 30 hours a week of creating content for his campaign. Now, I don't know how successful those accounts are going to be because that, I think, to users feels a little bit more manufactured as opposed to the other stuff. But man, like they are really trying to make a push. We'll see if it works.
This is why I'm so skeptical that this will work, is not because I am skeptical of the value of social media influence or the power of these influencers. I mean, there are folks in the political space where if I named the top 10 YouTubers, nobody here in Washington, with very few exceptions, would know who any of those people were, right? Because it's just a totally different content creation bubble. On the other hand, part of the reason why people thrive as social media influencers is people feel like there's some level of authenticity there, even if it is fake, feigned authenticity as it often is. So with stories out there like Bloomberg is buying people off for social media posts, that, to me, that feels like it totally undercuts it.
Well, it's one thing to pay for memes, because a lot of people do that. It's one thing to, like, pay for an ad, you know, from time to time, and that makes total sense. But if that's, like, your whole strategy, you are doing something wrong. Because millennials and Gen Z, the people, you know, that you're trying to reach through these types of things, can sniff out inauthenticity from a mile away. So if you're just doing stuff like I was scrolling through some of the candidates' Instagram pages yesterday, I was scrolling through Amy Klobuchar's Instagram page, and it just looks like one giant ad. None of it really looks authentic. And I think, you know, there has to be some of that. And so you have like these older, like these septuagenarians trying to be authentic on social media, but not succeeding. So like great example of this is when Elizabeth Warren did her Instagram Live, where now she's recording and like, I'm gonna go grab me a beer.
Yes.
It's like, oh gosh,
and look,
it's painful.
Look, I'm on record as not being a huge Elizabeth Warren fan. And I even think that when that happened, we did a segment on this show kind of poking fun at it. But I will say it is... Look, if I was going to identify with any presidential candidate standing in my kitchen in like a fleece with my golden retriever, drinking a beer, and scrolling through social media is in fact how I spend a not insignificant amount of my time.
Well, it wasn't the doing that.
Yeah.
It was the way that she did
Yes.
it, right? So when AOC does an Instagram Live, you're like, yes, that looks like my best friend doing an Instagram Live. But when Elizabeth Warren does it, it's a little weird. And I think it's partly because it's like both sides have to realize that it's awkward. So if she realizes that it's awkward, which it didn't seem like she did, then the audience kind of can go along with it. But if it's like you're trying to be something that you're not, it's just, it doesn't come across well.
Let's talk about Pete Buttigieg for a second,
Yes.
because he has tried to position himself as the heir to the Obama, not the Obama agenda in the way that like Biden says, hey, I was Obama's guy, but in this sort of sense of I'm a young, aspirational figure, I'm looking to the future, I can bridge divides. But I don't feel like I feel like when you thought of Obama 08, you thought of innovation on social media, doing cool things that have never been tried. And I actually feel like I haven't seen that from the Buttigieg campaign. Are you seeing anything that Mayor Pete or any of these other Democrats are doing that maybe isn't getting a ton of attention but is actually connecting with voters?
Honestly, I don't really have a good answer for this question. My
That's
answer
okay.
would be basically no. I was talking to someone else about this a couple days ago on a podcast about, if I had to pick one candidate, who would it be that's doing well on social media? And I think it's just such wild mediocrity coming from these candidates. You would think, particularly with Buttigieg, that he would have been surrounding himself with this sort of team.
He infamously has tons of Silicon Valley backing.
And so you would think that there would be people on his team that would allow him to do things that were really innovative. But honestly, in my opinion, we saw more stuff that was innovated coming out of 2016, 4 years ago, than we do coming out of this race. And social media has innovated so much in the past 4 years. We should objectively be able to create new content. And most of what's being done is just so similar. It's just a lot of cross-posting where you're basically posting the same content on multiple different social media platforms. A lot of, just a lot of fundraising asks that people are doing. It's like you see the same ad from Bernie Sanders over and over and over again on YouTube. I am once again asking for your financial support. It's like, yes, for the millionth time, and it's
But
it's just not
repetition can be
innovative.
good because you remember what that ad said.
Right.
You just repeated it back to me.
Okay, yes. But in some ways it's good, but I'm not so sure that it's good for millennials and Gen Z. Sure. It might be good for the older folks, but I don't know if it's necessarily good for us.
Speaking of the older folks, so
Yes.
I remember being in this world, a decade ago and trying to talk to Republican consultants about, hey, you need to reach younger voters, social media matters. People were trying to wrap their heads around, wow, Barack Obama used this Facebook thing. I thought it was just for college kids and then he organized all these people and wait, I need to know more of this. And so, social media has had an effect on elections ever since. Republicans used Twitter very effectively in 2010 to harness Tea Party energy. Democrats were behind on that. Then Republicans got behind on digital targeting. Democrats just crushed it on that in 2012. You get to 2016, and then there's all the stuff about the Trump campaign and Cambridge Analytica and what have you, which is a whole separate story.
So much drama.
Reportedly this week, the Trump campaign has hired a Republican strategist who comes from the Cambridge Analytica world. So I want to talk a little bit about what the Trump campaign does and doesn't do well. The president loves a good meme. Sometimes they're controversial. For instance, him posting the GIF of the wrestling match.
Wait, you say GIF. I'm sorry, that triggers me.
I'm so sorry. Your
It's
GIF.
It's GIF.
Potato. I'm not a strong partisan on this one. So,
okay.
But of the wrestling match where they had superimposed CNN on one of the wrestlers' faces, and look how funny this is. And there were a lot of people outraged, and a lot of people just thought this is no big deal. Regardless, this is the president of the United States, and he also loves a good meme.
Yes.
So tell me, what's your assessment of the Trump campaign who has really struggled with younger voters, but still seems to have figured out how to target older voters very well with social media.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your assessment of how they are doing in this game.
The Trump campaign is pretty good. I mean, not pretty good. They're very good at Facebook. And the president is, I mean, for everything we say about how much we dislike his tweets sometimes, before President Trump, tweets were not national news. And now they are. And, you know, I mean, he's just become this incredible force on the platform. In fact, you know, we were talking before recording about my time doing speech in college. And my first extemporaneous question that I ever got was, is President Trump a Twitter master or a Twitter disaster? And, you know, this is like about 5 years ago.
Can't it be both?
Yes. And my answer to the question was that he's a Twitter master, not because I like everything that he tweets, but because, you know, he's done something that's really innovative by having mostly personal control over his social media. And there are so few candidates that do that. They just farm it out to a staffer, they farm it out to a digital media company, and they're not doing it themselves. And people can tell that that is inauthentic.
And his voice on Twitter, love it or hate it, has been consistent for a decade.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got, you know, you can go back and find, you know, strange tweets
true.
where he's complaining about Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson
Yes.
or, I mean, goodness knows what else. But he has been tweeting in the same voice for a decade.
Yeah.
And I've noticed a lot of politicians on the Republican side these days, their social media accounts now all speak in a Trumpian manner, but that's not how those politicians have traditionally spoken. They're trying to
don't try to be Trump if you're not
adapt
Trump.
to the language of the day,
Yeah.
but it's not authentically how they talk.
Yes, I would agree with this. And I think, so the vast majority of the experience that I've had with doing social media for candidates and stuff has been just basically a lot of the same stuff. And there's just very little innovation, but except the trying to sort of conform to where social media is as opposed to focusing on where it's going. So one of the things I wrote about several months ago is that there isn't a single 2020 candidate on TikTok, which is really weird because TikTok is kind of the place where everyone's going. And I think it's a very, very small percentage. Now, obviously, these aren't going to be people voting in 2020, but a very small percentage of people aged 13 to 17 that are still on Facebook. I'm pretty sure it's like less than 1%. It's insane. So there's very little focus on that sort of stuff. And then even on platforms that are heavily used by millennials like Instagram, there's just not much. Like the Trump campaign is not doing extra well on Instagram. They have to have more authentic content. And I don't know if Trump is the sort of candidate that's really, that's really good for Instagram as a platform, but I don't know. There has to be more effort.
You can follow his family members, like Ivanka, for
That's
instance.
true.
Because she also comes from, again, love her or don't, she comes from a world of where she used to have to market jewelry and clothes.
That's true.
And so for her, Instagram feels a little more like she gets it. And
yeah. It's a little more like it's her space.
Well, I want to ask you about TikTok because I recall very strongly in 2014, that was the year when I first heard about Snapchat, and I was doing a fellowship on a college campus where students were so excited about it. And, you know, it had this pretty quick rise, and, you know, they were launching political shows. You had various candidates trying to figure out how to use something like Snapchat in 2016.
Yeah.
But I feel like that has now been eclipsed in the conversation about what's new and hot in social media by TikTok. Why do you think let me actually reframe this. To what extent do you think it is concerns about TikTok's affiliation with China that is why political campaigns have not embraced it?
So I actually think that has very little to do with it.
Okay.
I think people might say that's why they're not doing it, but I don't really believe it. And the reason I don't believe it is because if you're saying, okay, I don't want to be on TikTok, you would want to back that up by then being really heavily involved in other platforms and innovating in other places.
But their lackluster engagement elsewhere sort of betrays that it's actually just that this isn't a high priority?
Right. I think it's just sort of like oftentimes I think politicians use sort of controversies about different social media platforms as an excuse to not figure out why people are on them and why the eyeballs are there.
For many of my listeners who may not be TikTok users or deeply familiar with it,
yes.
Explain to my listeners a little bit about what TikTok is.
Oh, yes. Okay, so TikTok, I love TikTok. And look, I know there might be some issues with it, and I'm open to having conversations about the privacy issues. Like, I totally understand that. But the content on TikTok is just so good.
So,
and it's so
what
funny.
type of content is on TikTok?
Yes, so it's all video content. So it's basically just like a continuous feed of videos, and all of the videos pretty much are affiliated with a sound of some kind. So you might have other videos that have gone viral on TikTok, and now people are making videos based on the sounds from those videos. Very meta. Or you might have famous songs. So there have been a lot of musicians who have actually, not well-known musicians, who have had little clips go viral on TikTok and then have had these really successful songs. So it's basically just a constant feed of videos, and it's all really, most of the content on TikTok is funny. I say there are about two main types of videos on TikTok. There are funny videos, and then there are dance challenge videos, which sounds really random, but that's the bulk of it. So yeah, it's a very eclectic mix, but the content is so good because the algorithm on TikTok for finding out what type of videos you're interested in is insane.
Well, one thing that I've also heard about TikTok, about the moments when political content makes its way into TikTok, is that it can sometimes be a little jarring because it's like, here's a funny video of a cat. Here's somebody doing some funny dance moves. Here's 10 seconds of somebody being like, capitalism is causing the death of humanity. Yeah. And then it's like, oh, wait, nope, another cat video. And it's like, whoa. Yes. That was a tonal shift.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see if any campaigns do decide to get on the platform. Do they use it in a way that feels organic to the other content that's already there?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. You know, the Washington Post, I think, has done a pretty good job of jumping into this space, but the question always remains, how do you innovate and how do you fit into this space without doing something like you're saying that's jarring or that just can't gain any traction because it's just so different from everything else.
Well, Haley, thank you so much for joining me to break it all down.
Thanks for having me.
I've been talking to Haley Victory Smith, editorial fellow at USA Today. Before that, I was talking to Eugene Daniels, Politico campaign reporter. You've been listening to The Trendline with Kristen Soltis Anderson on SiriusXM's POTUS Channel 124. We'll see you next week.